In this video, you're going to have the goal of being able to identify and evaluate problems using absolute values. Now, if you remember from class, an absolute value is a number's distance from 0 on the number line. So in our first example, we have -9, which is right here on our number line, and its distance from 0 is 9 units away. So -9's absolute value is +9. Now for +9 and its absolute value, +9 would be on this side of the number line, and its absolute value is just simply 9 because it is still +9 units away from 0. Similarly, with -5, its absolute value is 5 because this number is still 5 units away from the origin 0. Now, in questions 4 and 5, you're going to see here, I'll highlight these, you're actually going to have a negative outcome with these absolute values. And the reason why is you'll notice that the negative symbol is actually on the outside of these two problems. Now, the absolute value only affects what's within the absolute value brackets. It does not affect anything on the outside of it. So you actually can get a negative value in an absolute value problem. So while you'll see that 3 and -4 are still positive absolute values away from one another, so here this would be 3 and here this would be 4, you're still going to have a negative on the outside. Sometimes it's called the opposite absolute value on the outside of your solution. So the solution to these is -3 and -4. Now, before we move on to the operations of certain values, I first want to talk about the order of operations. Now, if you had me prior to this year, you're going to know that I used to teach PEMDAS to teach the order of operations. And what PEMDAS was it represented parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And what this was used for is to identify what operations to complete first when you have a long problem with multiple operations involved in it. Now, we're not going to use PEMDAS anymore. We're going to use GEMDAS. And the reason we use this is the G actually stands for groups. So for example, parentheses represents a group of numbers, as does absolute values, as do different types of brackets. So we need to make sure that when we're solving certain problems, that we look what's within the group first and solve that before we move on to any of the outside operations. So if you want to give yourself a sort of small assessment, you can try these problems on your own. And if you would like, you can pause the video while you do that. And in about 5 seconds, we'll start this video up again so you can check your work. Now that you've had some time to try these problems on your own, what we're going to be doing is solving these problems together. So I'm going to be looking through my order of operations chart. I can see that there are no groups. Luckily, I don't have any parentheses or absolute values. I have no exponents. I do have multiplication right here. So I'm going to multiply 5 times 2, which gives me a value of 10. I'm going to drop everything else down. 13 plus 10 is going to give me a sum of 23. 13 plus 10 is 23. Now in our next example, you're going to see that we have a group right here with 2 operations in it. We have 8 times, whenever you see a number next to a group of parentheses, that means multiplication. So 8 times 3 squared plus 2. So what we'll be doing is we're going to first solve the exponent within our group. And we have 3 squared, which just means 3 times 3. In this case, that's 9 plus 2 in our group times 8. Next, we have to add 9 plus 2. That gives me 11. We multiply that by 8, and our final answer is going to be 88. In our next example, we have a couple operations. We have addition, division, exponents, and we actually have a negative value in here as well. Now you'll see from our chart there are no groups, but there are exponents, so I'm going to solve that first. 4 squared, which means 4 times 4, that's going to give me a value, or a product I should say, of 16. I'm going to bring everything else down, divided by 8, plus negative 6. Now I need to solve division next, because that takes priority over addition. So 16 divided by 8 will give me 2, and I bring everything else down, plus negative 6. And once I find the solution to this, it's clear that it's just negative 4. Now, when we bring absolute values into the mix, it's a little difficult, or I shouldn't say difficult, but it's a little bit different in the order that we have to do things, because you have to remember that absolute values are a group in itself. So those take priority over all other operations. So remember, absolute values include parentheses. They include groups include parentheses, absolute values, and brackets. So in our first example, what we're going to do is we're first going to take the absolute value of negative 25, which you should know is just positive 25. I'm going to bring down everything else. Next, we have addition and multiplication. Multiplication takes priority. So 5 times 4, that gives me 20, plus 25, and this will give me a sum of 45. Next, we actually have an operation within an absolute value. So what this means is I'm going to have to solve this problem first. So I'm going to see that I have the absolute value of 13 plus negative 20. So 13 plus negative 20 is going to give me negative 7. I can't forget about that absolute value, plus 3 to the third. Now I'll have to solve the absolute value of this problem, which will just give me positive 7 plus 3 to the third. Lastly, I need to take the power of 3 to the third, which means 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. I'm going to add that with 7, and I'm going to get a final solution of 34. Next, we have an operation within a parenthesis, and we also have a number on the outside. Now again, whenever you have a group that's next to a coefficient or a number on the outside of a group, the operation that's taking place is multiplication. So as I'm solving this problem, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to solve the subtraction problem within my absolute value. 24 minus 26, that's going to give me negative 2. I bring everything else down. I have 9 minus negative 2 divided by 3. I'm going to first take the absolute value of negative 2, which is positive 2, and I'm going to leave this in parentheses to remind myself that this is still a group. Even though I found the absolute value of negative 2, I need to put the parentheses around it because this is a group and I need to take care of that operation first. Bring everything else down, times 9 divided by 3. From here, I'm going to find the product of 9 and 2, which is 18, divided by 3. And here we just have one single operation. 18 divided by 3 gives me a quotient of 6. So my final answer is 6. Now what I'd like you guys to do is try these problems on your own. And in about 5 seconds, once you're done pausing the video and trying these problems on your own, we'll work through them together. Alright, now that you've had some time to try these problems on your own, let's work through them together. Now I'm going to see here that I have 4 squared plus 5 plus the absolute value of negative 20. So if you remember, absolute values are groups, so I'm going to solve this first. The absolute value of negative 20 will be positive 20. And I'm going to bring everything else down here. And I'm going to see here that I have exponents. I also have addition. Exponents take priority, so I'm going to solve that first. 4 squared gives me a value of 16 plus 5 plus 20. And because I just have one operation here, it's just simply addition, I'm going to add these together. So I have 16 plus 5 is 21, and 21 plus 20 gives me a solution of 41. In our next example, you're going to see that all of our operations are actually within the absolute value. So the first thing I'll need to do is solve multiplication within my group. 9 times 2 will give me 18. And I bring everything else down, including the absolute values. So 8 minus 18, and the absolute value around that. 8 minus 18 is going to give me a value of the absolute value of negative 10. And once I take the absolute value of that, I just get positive 10 as my solution. In our next example, it's kind of a long one, and there are a lot of operations going on here. We have 30 divided by 5 plus 5 times the absolute value of 16 plus negative 7 minus 6. So I'm going to make sure that I solve my groups first. I have my 16 plus negative 7. That just gives me, if I combine these two, the absolute value of positive 9. I'm going to bring down everything else. 30 divided by 5 plus 5 times the absolute value of 9 minus 6. Now the absolute value of positive 9 is going to be positive 9. So this is just going to be 5 times 9, and I bring everything else down. Next, I have no more absolute values to deal with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve my multiplication portion of this problem first. Or actually, I should change that. I'm actually going to solve my division first. Sorry, I thought that was an addition sign. So 30 divided by 5 is going to give me a quotient of 6. I bring everything down. 6 plus 5 times 9 minus 6. Next, I solve my multiplication portion. 5 times 9 is 45. I bring everything else down. Minus 6 plus 6. So 45 plus 6 is going to give me 51. 51 minus 6 is just going to lead me back straight to 45. Now that you've completed this video, make sure that you complete the pop quiz that's attached to this video within the homework page. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And I hope you've reached your goal of being able to identify and evaluate problems using absolute values. Goodbye.